Okay guys, so in this video, we're just gonna go over all the little details that I found out that you need to be paying attention for along the way while doing the build. Couple things. We talked about kind of isolating the cooling system. So we didn't have to risk whether the heater core was bad or anything like that. So you'll see these are super simple. I just machined some aluminum plugs. Besides the fact that they're a little shinier, they look very similar to what came on the car from the factory. For the transmission cooler block off, because obviously this is a manual transmission car. Another thing, if you saw my reel on my fuel lines, I spoke a little too soon. You can see we're finished up over here. All I did was, I'll post some photos later to Instagram. Basically took a dash 4 steel fitting and machined off the barbed fitting off of the stock Volkswagen piece down here and TIG welded them together. So now I've got a dash 4 inlet for my fuel pump. Now on my return side, let me grab this over here. This was originally supplied by S&P. This is what happens when you assume, you know how the phrase goes, I just assumed it went here on the return. It was actually for the pressure side facing this way. The return needs to use the OEM piece, and I'm going to show you guys why. Two reasons, and I'm glad I grabbed this. One, you guys will see, let me get out of the sun. This little barb on here. If you look at all the injectors, okay, they have this second line, not the hard line coming off the high pressure injection pump, but this second line. This is for, if I understand correctly, if the injectors take on air or they're over pressured, it allows the injector to bleed off a little pressure. I guess it's important on startup. So one, it allows it to return, but two, if you look at this bolt, let's take this apart. There's actually a little check valve in here. So I'm glad I looked at this, because this is not just a banjo fitting. This does two things. It allows any air or excess pressure to get bled off somehow by the injectors. I got to look into it. Something I thought was pretty interesting though, from the factory. These must be very low pressure lines because there's no clamps on them. They just push onto the barbs. So nothing crazy, just thought I'd point this out. You got to run this fuel return banjo fitting that comes on the TDI motor. You need that little check valve. I don't know what pressure it's rated at, but the engineers at Volkswagen got it figured out. So there was that. Another thing, a steam line. This guy right here, we added this 5/16 barb to the coolant line, the coolant return side, because if you follow this hose around over here, on the back side, there's another barb that the hose attaches to. It's pretty common in many motors. It's called a steam port. It's usually just a pocket where the steam from the coolant gets trapped. So it's a little vent, basically where the coolant deadheads up in the cylinder head, so it allows it to cycle back through. That was something of note. Trying to think what else. Let's see. Oh, slight bummer. I don't think there's any way around it, and it's no knock against S&P. It's just a retrofit for a motor. Our tensioner, okay, it makes contact right inside here on the stamping on the frame. So it's not much. Basically back to this stamping line. My hand's in the way. But basically back to this stamping line. We're gonna have to move this back. You can see where I've scuffed up the paint by test fitting this thing over and over and scratching it up, but we'll go back and touch that up. So those are just a couple things we noticed along the way. If you'll look in here, really basic, if you're overwhelmed by the way a TDI motor looks, yanked fresh out of a car at the wrecking yard on a pallet, it's understandable, there's hoses all over it. But when you get into it, it's really not that bad. If you look at the coolant system, really only the auxiliary thing on here besides the feed and return to the radiator is your oil cooler return lines. So that's basically it on the coolant side. Everything else is plugged. We did get the heater valve from S&P, but we're gonna put that in once we test the heater core and we know it's good. We got some other small things done, nothing major. The tins we got on the front cover and the balancer, or the harmonic balancer slash crank pulley. They're kind of one and the same on this motor. It's covered up. I might be able to show you if we can get a camera in there. Oh, we might be able to. If you look way down in here, you can see that's the motor mount bolt that I'm pointing to. I had to turn down that nut, and here's the reason why. Just past where you can see, obviously I'm not going to take it all apart right now, but is the idler pulley, or one of the idler pulleys for the timing belt. So what I was concerned with is when the motor mount flexes forward and back, I was afraid that the end of that bolt and nut was going to make contact with the idler pulley for the timing belt, which would be bad all the way around. So there's that challenge. And then the other challenge was, because the mount's sheet metal, the more we tightened it, the more the bolt wants to protrude, can't even talk today, through the other side, okay? So it was gonna make contact with the pulley. So the way we solve that situation is similar to like a U-shaped spacer, like an alignment shim. We made aluminum spacers, or shims, that will slide behind the head of the bolt. And what that allowed us to do was basically creep up on the tension of the motor mount bolt while shimming the back of it, allowing us to torque it down without the bolt wanting to draw all the way through into the tensioner pulley. So when we climb underneath the car, I can show you guys the details on that. Maybe I'll give you a sketch later. If anyone has any questions on what I'm talking about, you can DM me. If I were gonna do this, I know it's a bolt-in kit. If that mount could move back even just 1 inch, it would be a huge benefit. So I don't know, maybe we'll do a weld-in kit that can solve that clearance issue. I know some guys run without that idler pulley on the timing belt, but I'd rather run it and figure out a way around the motor mount issue. So anyways, we did come up with a way around it. Other than that, EGR delete's done. We just got the basic cap for the EGR on the backside over here. Turbos installed, oil cooler lines are all hooked up on the backside. Stainless exhaust is in. That S&P downpipe is pretty damn nice, clears the rack real good. Yeah, trying to think, guys, any other little minor details. I think that's it. Finding out new stuff every day as we go through the assembly. Right now, next on the list is we've got some of our parts here. We've got a local rebuilder. He does an excellent job with these. Goes through them, puts US bearings and seals in them, tests them, and if there's an issue, he's right up the street. I bring it back. I like having stuff like this rebuilt because you know it fits. If it came off, it'll go right back on. So sometimes from a parts store, you get the wrong part out of the box. Other than that, guys, that's all the little details that I noticed that I thought were worth your attention. So next up is just more assembly. We're gonna get the intercooler in. You guys can see up here. It's got my greasy mitts all over it. We're gonna acetone it, Scotch Brite it again, and we'll clear coat it. Intercooler's not bolted in, it's over on the other side. But we've got our intake tubes. We've got our pressure side tube on the other side as well. Over the next couple days, a couple things we gotta do is start laying out and planning the electrical for gauges. We're running some glow shift gauges. They look really cool. They should go awesome with the overall look of the interior of the car. So we're running all electronic sending units, which will be nice because you don't want actual oil pressure inside the cabin of the car. So we're gonna go over some of that stuff and let's see, there was that. Ooh, and wrapping up the, I guess what I'd call the chassis side of the fuel system. Obviously we've got our hard lines, and we've got this bulkhead plate. If you look back here, there's these dash 4 fittings on the bulkhead plate. There's gonna be a flex line that mounts down to here. Oh, I forgot. We've got that marked up to drill. So I'll show you, those markings right there are for this fuel filter and water separator. This is off of a 03 TDI. So when I talked to Chase about this build, one of the things he said he wanted to do was drive it from California all the way up to Washington. Well, if that's your plan to do that with a car, then I would definitely recommend having as many basically stock or dealer available parts. So rather than going with something aftermarket for a fuel filter and water separator, just a good old Volkswagen part. This is going to mount back here right on these marks, and I'll show you guys how we're going to mount that, not with a nut and bolt. We're going to do a nut cert. So this is going to mount vertically back here, and then we'll have flex lines that come off our dash 4 male fittings down to our water separator and fuel filter, and then the feed and return all the way down the chassis back to the tank. So we'll be going over gauges and finishing up the fuel system, and then after that, next thing is the interior cabin stuff. We got to get the shift linkage hooked up, and we got to get the drive-by wire pedal installed and the wiring harness hooked up. So other than that, guys, that's kind of where we're at on the build. Those are some of the little details we handled. Other than that, it's coming along super nice. In the next video, we'll cover basic installation and setup. We'll give you a little teaser. We got these really nice Solo Works coilovers. So we'll go over a little review on that. Just going over the basics, how to install them, how to set them up. And yeah, guys, stay tuned. A lot more coming.